Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take complex topics, cut through the noise, and turn them into crystal clear insights just for you. Today, we're plunging into something incredibly current and, well, critical, the world of digital personal data. Our mission for this deep dive is to unpack India's Digital Personal Data Protection Act, the DPDP Act of 2023. And we're not just looking at it broadly, we're really laser focused on its profound and, frankly, immediate impact on businesses right there in Hyderabad. Think of this as your essential guide to navigating a new powerful law, or maybe more importantly, how to sidestep some pretty significant risks. Because let's be honest, the stakes here are huge. We're not just talking about minor tweaks. Non-compliance could lead to penalties reaching an eye-watering 250 crore. And with public awareness around data privacy just exploding, this isn't just about dodging a fine anymore. It's really about building and keeping that trust that's, well, absolutely vital for any modern business.
Absolutely. And what's truly fascinating about this act, especially for a vibrant hub like Hyderabad, is that it really goes far beyond just legal checkboxes. This is a fundamental shift in how businesses operate. For those key sectors here, IT, pharma, healthcare, fintech, aligning with DPDP isn't just about legal protection. It's about embedding privacy by design right into your core. It means you can't just, bolt privacy on. At the end, it has to be there from the first line of code, the first process. That's what secures your long-term growth and reputation in this data-driven world.
Okay. Well, let's unpack this a bit more then. For a business owner listening, maybe someone in Hyderabad, what exactly is the DPDP Act 2023, at its heart? What's it trying to achieve?
Well, stripped down. Its core purpose is to regulate how personal digital data, and that means basically any information that identifies an individual, is collected, stored, processed, and transferred. And its reach is incredibly broad. We're talking about all businesses operating in India that handle personal data. Plus, and this is key, foreign companies that process data related to Indian citizens. So yeah, if you're touching Indian data, you're definitely covered.
That makes sense. Pretty wide net. But diving deeper, what are the sort of core elements, the key features business leaders should really grasp from this act?
Well, there are several key things. It sets up clear legal requirements for explicit consent and transparency from data principals. That's you, the user. It defines clear rights for these users, giving them more control over their own data. And just as importantly, it lays out clear obligations for data fiduciaries. Those are the businesses collecting and processing the data. Now, critically, there are extra sort of heightened responsibilities for what the Act calls Significant Data Fiduciaries, or SDFs. These are generally larger organizations, or maybe ones handling really sensitive data. The Act also sets mandatory breach reporting timelines, and yes, those hefty penalties we mentioned for getting it wrong.
You mentioned Hyderabad specifically. You said it's really interesting. What makes Hyderabad's situation stand out compared to, say, other tech hubs? And why is it so crucial for companies there to act now?
Yeah, Hyderabad is kind of uniquely positioned. It's a massive hub for tech, life sciences, and financial services. And these are all sectors that, just by their nature, handle incredibly sensitive user data every single day. Think about it. A fintech firm has all that KYC data, right? A pharma company has patient records, clinical trial data, a SaaS provider, huge amounts of user behavior analytics. What our analysis clearly shows is that failing to comply here can lead to just devastating operational risks, severely damaged brand reputation, and a really significant loss of customer trust. It's not just about the money, it's about the very foundation, the core of your business.
That's a powerful point. So given that, who exactly in Hyderabad needs to be thinking about a DPDP readiness assessment? Does it apply to absolutely everyone, even like a small tech startup?
In short, yes. It's essential for any organization that collects, stores, or processes personal data. We've identified some high-risk sectors right there in Hyderabad. First, IT and SaaS. They're collecting user behavior, analytics, login data. Think about the sheer volume of personal data in just one popular app. Then, pharma and biotech. They're managing really sensitive patient records, clinical research data, sometimes even genomic or biometric data, things like DNA sequences, fingerprints. That stuff needs extra careful handling. Finance and fintech, obviously. Handling KYC data, transaction histories, very personal financial details, huge responsibility there. And e-commerce and edtech. They often store demographic and behavioral data, sometimes relating to children, which has specific sensitivities under the Act. So if you operate in any of these spaces, this applies directly. The Act also clearly defines two key roles you need to understand. There's the data fiduciary. That's the entity deciding how and why data is processed. And then you have the Significant Data Fiduciary, the SDF. These are the large-scale processors, often with added compliance needs. And this includes, importantly, the mandatory appointment of a data protection officer, or DPO. This isn't just an IT role. It's someone strategic, bridging legal, tech, business ops. SDFs also have to conduct data protection impact assessments, or DPIAs.
Right, a DPO and a DPIA. That sounds like quite a bit to take on board. You mentioned a 7-step framework earlier. Can you maybe walk us through that, make it a bit more practical?
Absolutely, yeah. Think of this as your roadmap to getting DPDP ready. So, step 1, you really need to identify your role under the Act. Are you a data fiduciary or are you an SDF? This isn't just some label. That classification genuinely defines your whole compliance path and your legal responsibilities.
Okay, so first figure out what you are under the Act. And once you know your role, what's next on this roadmap?
Step 2 is all about mapping. You need to map your data collection, storage, and processing. This basically means building a detailed inventory. What data are you collecting? Why are you collecting it? Where is it stored? Who has access? Are you sharing it with third parties? Is any of it stored offshore? Think of it like creating a detailed map of where all your sensitive data treasure is buried. You need to know who has the key, where it travels, its whole life cycle. Visualizing this with, say, flowcharts and data lifecycle documents is super helpful.
That makes total sense. You can't protect what you don't know you have, right? So after mapping, what about consent? That seems like a huge piece of data privacy laws everywhere.
It really is. So, step 3 is to evaluate your consent management systems. Your framework has to capture informed and explicit user consent. It needs to offer easy ways for users to withdraw consent, too. That's crucial. And provide multi-language support, especially important in Hyderabad. You'll likely need English, Telugu, and Urdu interfaces for true informed consent. Plus, you need to keep detailed logs of that consent. A common mistake is making it too difficult to withdraw consent. Remember, user convenience here is key.
Got it. Easy withdrawal, multiple languages, good logs.
Sure.
Okay, so once consent is handled, what about actually staffing up for this? You mentioned roles.
Yeah. Right. For SDFs, step 4 is to appoint key compliance roles. This means getting a DPO in place, someone who reports directly to senior management. You also need a grievance officer to handle user complaints effectively, and you'll need to create solid internal protocols for how things get escalated. Like I said, the DPO isn't just a technical role, it's a critical strategic function.
Okay. And then comes that DPIA, which sounds pretty involved. What does that actually entail? What is it?
That's step 5. Conduct a data protection impact assessment, or DPIA. Think of a DPIA as a kind of privacy stress test for any new systems or projects you're launching. They're pretty much essential for large-scale processing, or if you're handling children's data or using AI for profiling. It's really a proactive step. You identify and try to mitigate privacy risks before they become public problems or, worse, lead to breaches.
Right, prevention is better than cure. And speaking of breaches, what happens if, despite best efforts, something does go wrong?
Well, that brings us neatly to step 6, establish breach notification protocols. This means having a clear, standard operating procedure, an SOP, for detecting breaches quickly. You need to notify affected users and the data protection board promptly. The timelines are quite specific. And, of course, document everything, record all your incident responses. You absolutely need to be able to act fast and transparently when a breach occurs.
And finally, step 7.
Uh-huh.
It probably comes back to the people involved, right? Your staff.
Exactly. Step 7 is all about people. Train employees and build awareness. You have to educate your staff on proper data handling practices, how to spot things like phishing or suspicious activity, and their specific roles in maintaining compliance. Honestly, employees are often the weakest link in data security if they're not trained. So tracking their participation, maybe periodically checking their knowledge retention, it's vital.
That's a fantastic, really actionable breakdown, thanks. And it feels like there are some nuances here that make Hyderabad specifically a bit distinct in all this. What makes the local context so important?
Yeah, there are definitely a few specific local things to consider. Multilingual consent, like we touched on, is huge. Your interfaces really must support local languages like Telugu and Urdu to ensure genuine informed consent. It's not just a nice to have. Then there are sector-specific needs. A pharma firm, for example, might need enhanced safeguards for genomic or biometric data, just given how incredibly sensitive that work is. And with so many organizations using remote infrastructure, Cloud-based systems, hybrid work environments, which are really common in Hyderabad. You absolutely need advanced access controls and top-notch security measures to protect that data wherever it happens to reside.
That's the challenge side.
Yeah.
But the good news, I suppose, is that companies aren't totally alone in this. There's quite a bit of available local support right there in Hyderabad, isn't there?
Absolutely, yes. You have reputable training programs available. Companies like InfoSec Train and Cyber Command, they offer DPO training, compliance workshops, things that can really help upskill your internal teams. And then there are specialized local consultants. Firms like Privacy Pillar, Bellwether, they specialize in everything from gap analysis and audits, right through to conducting DPIAs and helping draft your data policies. These local experts can be invaluable, really help you navigate the specific challenges of the Hyderabad business scene.
You mentioned penalties earlier, those big fines. But beyond those headline numbers, what's the real lasting damage businesses face if they just, try to ignore this act or put it off?
Well, the financial penalties are definitely severe, you're right. Failure to protect data could be up to 250 crore. That's huge. Not appointing a DPO if you're an SDF. That could be 150 crore. And mishandling children's data, around 100 crore. But honestly, beyond the fines, the other risks are often far more damaging in the long run. Things like customer distrust, losing customers. Then there are public investigations, potential legal action, even being disqualified from important contracts or vendor lists. Imagine losing major clients simply because you weren't compliant. It can cripple your long-term growth prospects. Really, proactive compliance is significantly more cost-effective than trying to do reactive damage control after a breach or a penalty. It's an investment, truly, not just an expense line.
Okay, that makes sense. So for organizations that maybe lack that deep in-house expertise, choosing a DPDP compliance partner in Hyderabad seems like a pretty smart move. What should they really be looking for in a partner like that?
Good question. First, I'd say look for industry-specific knowledge. You want someone who understands the specific nuances of healthcare or IT or SaaS, if that's your field. Second, they really need a legal technical hybrid capability, someone who gets both the law and the tech needed to actually implement it. It's not just one or the other. Third, make sure they offer practical tools, things for doing DPIAs, risk scoring, maybe even breach simulation exercises. You don't want someone purely theoretical. And fourth, check if they provide post-audit compliance support. Like I said, getting compliant is one thing. Staying compliant is an ongoing journey. You need a partner for the long haul.
Right, ongoing support. And if someone's actually on the phone with a potential partner, maybe interviewing them, what are some specific pointed questions they should ask to really gauge if they're the right fit for their Hyderabad business?
Yeah, definitely ask direct questions. Things like, do you provide specific support for classifying businesses like ours as an SDF or not? That's a key starting point. Also, can you assist with implementing multilingual UI for consent, specifically covering Telugu and Urdu? Test their local awareness. And maybe what's your actual process for identifying compliance gaps and then creating a practical remediation plan for us? Get specifics on their methodology. Those kinds of questions will help you assess their real capabilities and how well they understand your potential needs there in Hyderabad.
Great tips. Let's try and address some frequently asked questions that might still be floating around out there for you, the listener. First up, who exactly must comply with the DPDP Act in Hyderabad?
Basically, any organization collecting or processing the personal data of Indian residents. And yes, that absolutely includes startups and SMEs. No business is automatically exempt, although proportionality might apply to smaller entities in terms of how they comply.
Okay. And is appointing a DPO mandatory for absolutely everyone?
It's mandatory if you qualify as a Significant Data Fiduciary, an SDF. If you're classified as an SDF, then yes, appointing a DPO is a non-negotiable requirement under the Act.
What about the timeline for compliance? Is there a hard deadline looming?
Well, the final rules and specifics are still expected, perhaps by late 2025. There hasn't been a single firm deadline announced for absolutely everything yet. However, the strong advice is start early preparation now. The regulator is very likely to expect businesses to show good faith efforts and clear progress towards compliance, even before hard deadlines hit.
Right, don't wait. And how does this DPDP Act differ from GDPR, Europe's big privacy law, which many international businesses might be familiar with?
That's a common question. While they're definitely similar in their overall intent protecting personal data, the DPDP Act is specifically localized for the Indian context. It focuses heavily on digital personal data, and there are various nuanced differences in areas like, say, consent mechanisms, the specific powers of the Data Protection Board, things like that. It's definitely not just a simple copy-paste of GDPR.
Okay, tailored for India. And finally, can small startups maybe delay implementation just because they're small, maybe resource constrained?
The short answer is really no. While, as I mentioned, proportionality might apply, meaning the burden of compliance might be adjusted somewhat for smaller businesses, all businesses, regardless of size, need to show intent and make progress towards compliance. The fundamental principles of the law apply to everyone handling personal data in India. You can't just ignore it because you're small.
So when we boil it all down, what does this really mean for you, our listener based in Hyderabad? I think the key takeaway here is that compliance with the DPDP Act isn't just about, ticking boxes